And the reason that I am digging in on this, I cannot fucking wait for it to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was some left-wing douchebag, because the low IQ anti-Semitism is dragging us to hell.
Wait, let me get this straight, okay? He hates the left so much that he wants it to be, without a shadow of a doubt, the radical leftist, because the rest of us are so low IQ anti-Semitic because we're questioning the Zionist-occupied government's narrative about who killed Charlie? Really? That's a weird position for someone like Nick Fuentes to take, don't you think? Now imagine how sick this would all be if it turns out that Israel did have Charlie killed. Like, imagine. Welcome to another episode of Political Newbie. I am Noah Clark, and this is a space for newbies to politics like me, an average citizen waking up from a dream and trying to make sense of the mess that I find myself in, and I thank you so much for joining me. First things first, the one thing that I think we can all agree on is that Charlie Kirk's assassination, love him or hate him, was indeed a turning point for this country. And it must be a coincidence that there seems to be a sudden explosion of left-wing radical violence. No one is even asking how many of these left-wing radicals are actually paid Zionists. Can that be possible? They're desperate, they're willing to try anything, and they have no red lines. And we don't seem to be focusing enough on the fact that Charlie Kirk was beginning to ask questions about Jewish donors who seem to fund all of these destructive policies and organizations that target the stability of our country. Like, you know, the left-wing radicals.
Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. Now, I don't like generalizations. Not every Jewish person believes that. But it is true, the Anti-Defamation League was part and parcel with Black Lives Matter. It is true that some of the largest financiers of left-wing anti-white causes have been Jewish Americans. They went all in on woke, and it wasn't just ADL. It was some of the top Jewish organizations in the country that have done that. In fact, we have seen this with the recent retreat of Jewish donations that are no longer going to be administered to colleges, right? Mark Rowan, Leon Kopperman. Can we get that full list? It's very powerful. The part of the, so that's totally true. And by the way, Tucker Carlson reinforces this. So I'm going to it was quite a day on the internet. Tucker Carlson was interviewing Candace Owens. We have Candace Owens coming up next hour. And Tucker Carlson mentions that Jewish Americans have primarily been financing cultural Marxist ideas. We said this, by the way, last week, and people came after us.
We were on top of it.
We actually said it in a different way. We said, I'm glad that Jewish Americans are reconsidering their financing of cultural Marxism.
But they're not reconsidering their financing of cultural Marxism. Because if they do reconsider it, they wouldn't have control of the narrative that is artificially dividing us. They have to continue to fund it in order to keep us artificially divided, in order to implant thoughts and concepts into our head that would turn us against each other. Unfortunately, Charlie Kirk is no longer alive to explore this avenue of holding Jewish donors to account for these destructive, divisive policies and agendas that they're funding. The majority of them. And like he said, it's not just fringe groups. It's the majority of major Jewish donors.
And it wasn't just ADL. It was some of the top Jewish organizations in the country.
I bet you that his new recruits who are going to be taking over are not going to be talking about this. It's going to get buried, coincidentally.
And people misunderstood it intentionally and slandered us as being anti-Semites. But listen to this. Tucker Carlson is completely correct by saying this, that the philosophical foundation of anti-whiteness has been largely financed by Jewish donors in the country.
So not only is he calling them out here, he's also encouraging them to go see Tucker and Candace.
Tucker Carlson was interviewing Candace Owens. We have Candace Owens coming up next hour.
Two of the biggest, most prominent anti-Semites in the world right now. Meanwhile, Nick Fuentes is on PBD the other day saying that if he had to choose between the Browns and the Zionists, he'd choose the Zionists. The ones funding the anti-white campaign. Isn't that interesting? Here's another thing that we can all most likely agree on, all right? Anyone who is pressuring you to trust the authorities to do their jobs and lie to us should give you pause right now. Those are the same people going out of their way to convince us that Charlie turned his back on Candace. I was under the impression this entire time that these people were geniuses. They've been fooling us this whole time because they're geniuses. But really, it seems that they've been able to fool us because they've had control over the narrative, and we've all been asleep. Because now that we're all awake, we're exposed to how sloppy their lies are, and they're not even making an effort to clean it up. They're not even making any moves to lie better? Do you have the capacity to lie better than you're lying right now? Because these lies, for example, the one that you're stating that Charlie Kirk abandoned Candace, is so easily debunkable that it's so pathetic that you would go there. Like, at least wait for the censorship to kick in so that we can't prove that you're lying. At least. Here's a clip where Charlie Kirk not only slaps down the stupid claim that he abandoned Candace, but he also reminds us of one of his most important values, his commitment to free speech.
As an American Jew, I recognize the strong support the Conservative Party, and particularly the Trump administration, has shown for Israel and the Jewish community over the years. However, I've grown increasingly concerned about the rise in anti-Semitic rhetoric from some right-wing voices, and their messages appear to be resonating with parts of the Conservative Party. Do you think people like Candace Owens...
Okay, so I'm sitting here and I'm looking at her, I'm thinking, wow, clearly someone gave her that question to ask, right? And it almost looks like Charlie Kirk feels that way too, because he's been getting harassed, I'm sure, privately and publicly, about his leanings towards more anti-Semitic talking points. And he's like, okay, I'm going to slap this down again. I'm going to tell you again, I am never going to go against free speech. And what we need to do is have pro-Israel voices debating their points, convincing Americans with their ideas, not through censorship.
Tucker Carlson, Andrew Tate are using rhetoric that is anti-Semitic. And is the Trump administration doing enough to distance itself from this kind of rhetoric? Or are these figures being labeled as anti-Semitic by their peers?
Yeah, those are all friends of mine. Actually, I've never met Andrew Tate, but I've never met Andrew Tate. No, but Tucker and Candace are friends of mine, so I would not use those words against them. We have Candace and I have big disagreements on Israel for sure.
Yeah.
I'm very careful to use the anti-Semitic term unless it's very warranted. I think we should not throw it around too loosely. It's very similar to racism, right? Where it dilutes the meaning of it. Of course, there's real anti-Semitism out there. We know it when we see it, and it's gross and it's awful. For example, when Jews, right? Yeah. That is obviously anti-Semitism. Here's what I think is the problem. The problem, there's a lot of reasons why this is growing, but it's growing faster than it should because some pro-Israel voices want to try to use cancellation and censorship of anti-Israel voices, which I actually think creates even more anti-Semitism. There's people here today that don't like Israel. You're welcome up to the mic. We'll talk about it. I'm not going to try to take your free speech rights away. And I think all these bills that are trying to restrict speech, that are trying to, silence people, I think it's a big problem. I think that we need more pro-Israel advocates to do events like this, let everything be heard.
And this is one of the reasons why I'm so disgusted by what I'm seeing online recently with this HBCU college where these Kirk recruits went on the college to sort of debate Black college students on different ideas, and instead of Black college students debating these new Kirk recruits, they sort of like chased them off campus, and I'm so disgusted by that. I really don't care who's doing it. I don't care how old you are. I don't care the color of your skin. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care. I just don't care who you are. If you're not able to debate someone, then leave the room and advocate for someone who can represent your voice to debate another person and win the debate. Because if your only answer to something is to censor them by being against them speaking, then I'm against you, okay? And I'm pretty sure that everyone from all sides of the spectrum, whether you identify as right or left or center or independent or whatever you identify as, all of us can agree that free speech is a core value that we must defend. And we can find free speech defenders everywhere across the political spectrum. Those are the people we need to unite with. We can literally say, red line is, if you do not value free speech, we are not uniting with you. It's that simple. We don't have to divide ourselves between left and right and all this nonsense that we're doing, which, by the way, as Charlie Kirk pointed out, Jewish donors are funding. They continue to fund censorship. They fund it on the left and they fund it on the right. Like, leftists are pro-choice when it comes to abortion. Right-wing people are pro-choice when it comes to genociding babies. Leftists are pro-censorship when it comes to COVID. Rightists are pro-censorship when it comes to Israel. It's two sides of the same coin, and they keep distracting us so we're not actually seeing the contradictions properly. But if we start seeing it, we realize, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing the left is doing, so I'm probably a leftist at this point. I'm pro-choice for genociding brown babies in Palestine, but I'm not pro-choice for abortions in America? Wait, am I a leftist though? Because I'm pro-choice for genociding babies at some point, to some degree. When you start looking at it that way, we're all pretty much left and right, aren't we? And it's pretty disgusting that we don't see it and that they're able to psyop us into not seeing. We're being manipulated into being hypocrites and being manipulated into hating each other. But going back to Charlie Kirk, right? Up until the day before he died, he was kind of coached by this Rabbi Volitsky, who I would also consider his Hasbra coach. And this guy, Rabbi Volitsky, validates both Candace's and Tucker's claims that Kirk was not only receiving a lot of pressure from his donors and people around him, but he was also being attacked as an anti-Semite, in spite of how loyal and how devoted he has been his entire life, as his entire adult life, to Israel. And the lesson that we should learn here is that it doesn't matter how loyal you are. So if you're a Zionist, probably you should reconsider, because you will now have to go along with anything and everything that Israel wants you to go along with, or else they will start attacking you as an anti-Semite. But here is Rabbi Volitsky.
He annoyed people in the Jewish community over the last few months with some of the criticisms he had for Israel. And I argued, I don't know if you saw the piece I wrote in the Jerusalem Post a couple of months ago when he was being attacked after Tucker Carlson spoke at SAS, and people were calling him an anti-Semite. And little do they know, half the time he's on college campuses, all he's doing is hasbara and defending Israel. And he doesn't even want to be. He doesn't even know the issues that well, but he's forced to. But he dutifully, with a smile on his face, defends Israel left and right. We all saw what he did in England, passionately defending Israel. And that's not even what he wants to be doing. And now he's getting criticized as an anti-Semite. So I wrote that piece in the Jerusalem Post basically saying, listen, everybody, stop with the purity tests for every single view that he has to line up with, I don't know, Bibi's cabinet decisions. Relax. Okay, this is our greatest ally. Yes, he has questions. Yes, he's influenced by the other side as well. Good, I'm talking to him.
Good, I'm talking to him. Okay, let me do the talking, okay? Just stop your purity tests. I can sort him out. This bad cop way is going to push him away. He is our greatest ally. Just let me handle it, okay? Let me be the good cop here. I can get him to change his ways. Just relax. That's essentially what Rabbi Volitsky is saying right here. But this is the rabbi that sort of had this powwow session with Kirk the night before Kirk was killed. And he was saying that he was trying to tell the Jews and the Zionists to calm the down and to stop acting like piranhas in bloody water. And in Kirk's word, hyper-paranoid.
I think it's a hyper-paranoid, like we're just going to we're going to just stamp out everything type of practice.
Treating him like the enemy. Kirk's words. The second point that Rabbi Volitsky makes here is that Charlie Kirk has been doing Hasbra this whole time, and he doesn't even want to. But he's forced to because that's what he's getting paid to do, and he does it dutifully with a smile on his face.
Little do they know, half the time he's on college campuses, all he's doing is hasbara and defending Israel, and he doesn't even want to be. He doesn't even know the issues that well, but he's forced to. But he dutifully, with a smile on his face, defends Israel left and right.
Because at the end of the day, donors are pumping millions and millions of dollars into TPUSA to be Israel first, not America first. And Kirk started to communicate strongly in the last few months leading up to his death that, yes, I'm going to push the Hasbra you're forcing me to because I do sincerely love Israel, because he was programmed to, by the way. But I am going to push America first as much as I can. He was really trying to sort of pivot to, listen, guys, I have given you everything. I have been Israel first since I was 18 years old. I am now 31 years old, and my base is trying to figure out why we're feeling betrayed. We're feeling betrayed here because we're not doing better as a country. We're doing worse. And now we don't have a future as young people. And all we're hearing about is Israel, 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 and all of our money is going to Israel. And now there might even be talk of going to war for Israel. Meanwhile, we don't have a future. Nobody's really talking about it properly. And Charlie Kirk is starting to bring up that Jews are sort of funding these divisions, funding these bad open border policies, these bad economic policies. And since America first is Israel second and his donors aren't Israel second, well, you can make your deductions. And the last point is, even though Rabbi Volitsky was trying to convince the donors and these people around Charlie Kirk, the Zionists around Charlie Kirk, that he was going to find a better way to sort of convince him to get back on script, they still pulled funding. And here's Andrew Colvett, again, not only validating what Candace and Tucker said, but also confirming that his donors were pulling funding and did pull funding.
Charlie's position on Israel was very clear. I like them more than I like Hamas. I just wish I was free to criticize Israel and not be labeled an anti-Semite, because I can criticize my own government and not be called anti-American.
Right.
But why do I have more freedom to do, that and not criticize, a foreign government? And he was really upset that there was this sort of clampdown on the freedom of expression, the freedom of ideas, free speech when it came to a foreign government. And I will say this, he felt like he had earned the right as a friend of the Jewish people over the years and all of the things that he had done. He felt like his bona fides in that respect were unassailable and that he should have the freedom to say, hey, it's time to end the war. Hey, it's time to stop the killing. But, with Tucker, for example, we took some pushback. We lost some donors. And what's interesting is it wasn't necessarily Jewish donors, although that's a misconception about Turning Point's funding base, by the way.
Oh, it's a misconception, he says. Now he's trying to create some cover. So he's telling a little bit of honesty. That's what PR agents do, right? They mix honesty with a bit of deception, right? So he's creating some cover there for the fact that TPUSA is an Israel first, Jewish first organization, creating the cover by saying, oh, we're not receiving funding from Israel or Jewish people predominantly. But someone put together what his donor list looks like. And I'm just going to show you a picture here. His major donors are Shulman, Mercer, Rosenwald, Alt Media Networks, and you can see all these lines and how the funding is being connected to other people, including Tucker Carlson, I believe, is on here, because Tucker Carlson did, I think, receive funding from Mercer. But anyway, the point is, and Shulman is one of the guys who pulled funding from TPUSA. But I'm going to post this on my X account so you can see it. And there's another diagram that will also be on my X account so you could see different versions of these charts that were made. But it's looking like his biggest, most meaningful donors are Jewish and are Zionists and are pro-Israel. So even though they're American, we can kind of say for a fact at this point that Jewish, Zionist, American people, citizens, donors, whoever, are simply not America first at all. But again, all of these people, Josh Hammer, Andrew Colvett, Rabbi Valitsky, are all validating Tucker and Candace's claims, which is that Charlie was in transition and he was getting bullied and morally and financially threatened and blackmailed, because he was beginning to look harder and closer at the question of Israel and Jewish influence in our country. Josh Hammer admits that about 50% of all Charlie's events were of young people asking a lot of questions about Israel and Jewish influence, even the Talmud. It was getting there.
Charlie, if you look at campus talks for the past couple of years, he wasn't just getting asked about Israel. He was not just getting asked about two-state solution, about Gaza, borders, all this stuff there. No, he was getting asked about the Talmud, which is crazy. And he actually was able to provide very good answers. Better answers than probably 98% of Jews probably could offer there. So we talked a little bit about that sort of stuff, frankly. But above all, we really strategized about how to turn back the tide against rising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment on the American right in Republican Party circles among young Gen Z conservative activists there. And
when he's saying we tried to strategize, he's meaning people like him and Rabbi Valitsky and I guess maybe Andrew Colvett. I don't know who else. Maybe the donors, maybe Bill Ackman. They were all strategizing on how to turn the tides, get these young conservatives to fall back in love with Israel, because they were falling out of love with Israel. Hence why I call it Hasbra coaching, right? Even though, as Rabbi Valitsky admitted, Charlie Kirk didn't know enough, actually, on how to be a Hasbra person. He got regular talking points, but we have to kind of consider that for much of his life, he hasn't had to focus on defending Israel for much of his tenure at TPUSA, right? This is sort of new to him. So he had to be now coached by all these people, because they weren't really anticipating that right-wing people were going to kind of not necessarily unite with the left on anti-Israel stuff, but they themselves were going to be anti-Israel, and by default, you are now expanding the anti-Israel base from not just the left, but to the right. I don't think they were anticipating that. So Charlie was receiving a lot of coaching and a lot of pressure to be better at Israel Hasbra, which Josh Hammer is admitting to right here.
And it got to the point where these campus talks that Charlie was doing, give or take, these are his words, not mine, he would say that roughly half, 50% of the questions that he got asked were all on Israel, Jews, which first of all is disturbing. It's mind-boggling. It's frankly disturbing. That is not a sign of a healthy society.
It's not a sign of a healthy society. What? First of all, is it a sign of an unhealthy society when we're all wondering why all of our politicians are captured by Jewish donors? Why all of our big corporations and big tech companies are run by, if not Jews, Zionists? And in contrast, is it healthy if we focus on left-wing radicalism or white supremacy or black crime? We can hammer in on those topics, no problem. We can focus on the problems within those areas, white supremacy, black crimes, illegal immigration or immigrants just in general, DEI stealing white jobs, even though it seems that Jewish people are getting most of the DEI. That's a sign of a healthy society when we're focused on that, on those kinds of observations. But not healthy when we focus on Jewish and Zionist influence. Nope. No.
He was getting asked about like the Talmud, which is crazy, and he actually was able to provide very good answers. Better answers than probably 98% of Jews probably could offer there.
This is what Rabbi Velitsky was trying to convince these donors, right? Charlie Kirk was doing a really good job at Hasbra. He was dispelling questions about the Talmud better than 98% of Jews. He was doing a better job than Jewish people at defending Israel and Jews and their Talmud. And yet they still couldn't back down and stop calling him an anti-Semite and stop treating him like an enemy and stop pulling funding from TPUSA. This is what Charlie Kirk must have meant when he was talking about hyper-paranoia. And these people with all this power being hyper-paranoid. They have all the control. Why are they being hyper-paranoid? Why? I think at this point in the game, we're 2 weeks after Charlie Kirk's death, we can all say that we know that Charlie Kirk was not renouncing his love for Israel. No one has ever said that. And so people who are out there like Nick Fuentes saying, oh, Charlie Kirk was Israel's biggest defender and he was their number one boy and he was never renouncing his love for Israel. Nobody ever made that argument. People are making the argument that he was in transition, that he was asking more questions, that he was being a little bit more critical, that he was platforming anti-Semites. But nobody said that he was renouncing his love for Israel. So for people like Nick Fuentes to sort of use this as a legitimate argument to say that it's impossible that Israel could have had anything to do with Charlie Kirk's death is very disingenuous and should give everyone pause at what Nick Fuentes is doing right now, because he's trying to make an argument based on an argument that was never made. Does Nick Fuentes do that often? Does he? I wonder. I don't know. I don't know enough about Nick Fuentes to know, but this is definitely a Zionist strategy and he's employing it right now. And I do think that Nick Fuentes is smarter than that. So the only explanation I can come up with is that he's doing this on purpose and he knows exactly what he's doing. And we all know that Charlie Kirk was brainwashed into loving Israel, and you don't renounce something that you were brainwashed into loving that easily. It's obviously going to be a transition, and he was clearly going through one, and they're all admitting to it. We don't know where that transition would have led, but we do know that he was going through a serious and deep transition, and he was not holding back his punches. He was calling people out by name. A lot of it was focused on Jewish donors. So it might be safe to say that Charlie Kirk was doing a lot of Hasbra, or he was beginning to get a lot of coaching about how to do Hasbra better, and he just didn't know enough about on the topic. So he had people like Rabbi Velitsky from Jerusalem stepping in and coaching him over Zoom and all of that. But he was also probably doing his own research, talking to Tucker Carlson, talking to Candace Owens and other people, and started to realize that there was a disconnect between the talking points that he was given and what was facts. I mean, he went as far as to invite Marjorie Taylor Greene to speak at his next event and specifically asked if she wanted to talk about AIPAC. She posted the receipt on X the other day after he died, and this was a text message from August 27th where he was like, you should speak at AmFest. Would you want to also do a debate about AIPAC, etc.? Not with me, of course. No pressure. We'll do whatever you want. But he specifically said AIPAC, and we all know what Marjorie Taylor Greene's position is on AIPAC. Not only did she attend one of Nick Fuentes' events,
we are honored, we are humbled and excited to welcome to the stage right now for our first speech, and we love to get to know her much better. I think this is going to be the beginning of something great. The representative from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene also implied that JFK was assassinated because he defied Israel. And she goes, there was once a great president that the American people loved. He opposed Israel's nuclear program and then he was assassinated. I am for peace. I oppose war, including wars Israel wages. She's also said that AIPAC needs to register as FARA, obviously. So this is like way too anti-Semitic. I mean, now she's going to start putting this seed into all of these young conservative minds who probably don't really listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now they're going to be exposed to this. Now they're going to be asking even more questions. We can't have that. All the future leaders of the Republican pro-Israel movement, we can't have that. But this is what Charlie Kirk was getting up to in the weeks leading up to his death. Some real anti-Semitic stuff. Real Hamas supporting stuff. Kirk had also taken Tucker's, Candace's, and Marjorie's position on fighting wars for Israel. He was against it. And now that he's dead, TPUSA and Hegseth are talking about recruiting the new Kirk recruits into the army, just as whispers of war with Iran resurfaces. And not only that, after he started making noise about the Epstein files, then he was silenced by his team and he decided to pull back on asking about the Epstein files. He decided to say, you know what? Screw that. I really do want to stay focused on the Epstein files. And so he reignited his interest in the Epstein files. And he started becoming increasingly vocal about Epstein.
We as the American people deserve to have every Epstein file released with no redactions whatsoever, period. Right. And so yesterday, I don't want to comment because a lot of these people are my friends, but they got to make it right.
He says a lot of these people are my friends, so he doesn't want to comment, but we have to make things right. I don't know what that means. Who are the friends that he's talking about? Is he talking about Jewish donors? I don't know.
I don't want to comment because a lot of these people are my friends, but they got to make it right. And we, the American people, ran on transparency. We deserve to see the entire client list. Every document the government has regarding the Epstein files, we, the American people, should have on an easy to access website immediately, in a very, very quick fashion. I'm pushing for that both privately and publicly, just so you know.
But I also think it's very, very important for us to remind ourselves that Candace specifically, and Tucker, did not say that Israel killed Charlie. She said that Bibi is lying and everyone around him is lying, and she wants to find out why. We all do, I think. And if you don't want to know why all of these people are lying around Charlie, then you are obviously part of the Hasbra committee, right? So again, Nick Fuentes making this argument that Israel didn't kill Charlie, and it's highly unlikely that they did, and trying to discredit Candace and Tucker because they're asking questions raises a lot of suspicions of Nick being on the Hasbra committee. Candace, like the rest of us, also wants to find out why his so-called friends were calling him out, calling him an anti-Semite, why donors were pulling from TPUSA, and then as soon as he died, the whole Zionist team are blaming it on the radical left and Islam before he's even pronounced dead. We all want to know that. And why all of a sudden they're reinvesting in TPUSA. Even if they had nothing to do with Charlie's death, these are the things that we need to investigate. Who's benefiting from this? And Tucker Carlson came out with a new 9/11 documentary that really puts that into perspective, which is cui bono, right? The CIA and Israel benefited tremendously from the Twin Tower attacks. Why are they not investigated? And more specifically, the most fundamental point that should be investigated, if not anything else, is the people who placed bet options against American Airlines, the airlines that were supposedly hijacked and crashed into these targets. Why don't we have those names? And the names of the people who made these weird, strange financial moves on the days leading up to 10/7. And were there any moves made before 9/10, September 10th, the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated? These are things that we need to look into. So Nick Fuentes, who has spent the last 2 weeks trying to discredit Candace by repeating this lie that Candace is accusing Israel of killing Charlie. No, Nick, Charlie accused Israel of wanting him dead a month ago. I'm not going to name names, but I was told by someone close to Charlie Kirk that Charlie thinks Israel will kill him if he turns against them. And then someone responds, Tommy Borum responds, they would. Charlie turned heel on Israel. They would have someone shoot him at an open air event and then have some idiot groiper with a genetically anomalous issue there to be the patsy/fall guy. Part of why you never make the deal with the devil in the first place. And again, this was Tommy Borum responded to Harrison Smith on August 13th. The oddest exchange between Tommy and Harrison H. Smith, and it's not being investigated by the feds. I wonder why. Now here's a snippet of the exchange that happened under that post after Charlie was killed. So people came up on this post and they were like, wait a minute, it's scary how this was 100% accurate. And Tommy goes, scary, the Zionist retards are that predictable. Someone else goes, well, how would Israel convince the patsy to take the fall? That part is hard to grapple with. Well, you pretend to be an online trans user from a nearby school, infiltrate forums, ratchet discourse, fertilize the seeded idea to act/commit violence, offer aid in the form of the weapon being delivered to the shooter, offer to organize distractions in the crowd, etc. This is Tommy Borum saying how you would plan this event and sort of manipulate someone to be a patsy, someone vulnerable. Someone goes, what made you say this specifically? And Tommy Borum says, well, it's the most obvious way to make it a punishment/spectacle. Someone else goes, holy shit. Tommy responds, Israel is the true enemy of the people. I think we can all agree on that by now. And then someone else says, well, how did you know this? You are involved in and part of this murder. I think that's a reasonable position to take, because you're like, this is just way too weird that you could predict this. And Tommy says, a leopard doesn't change his spots. Israel's assets, control failure, followed by MOS assassinations, become predictable like weather patterns. One of the biggest supporters in what was the future of American politics was turning publicly to criticize them. They kill those. I mean, they did kill their own rabbi in Israel. They did Hannibal directive their own people. They're not against that. So, and now multiple sources are also saying that Israel might have killed Charlie. So Sam Parker, another sort of independent journalist, says Ron Unz, I have no idea who that is, from Unz Review, reveals that a source who knew Charlie Kirk unequivocally told him everyone in Kirk's circle, even including important Trump administration officials, suspected that Israel had probably killed the young conservative leader. And then Harrison H. Smith responds, I heard the same, but not just from the Trump circle, from Senate Republicans as well. What I think it's important to note, and for us to take away from all of this, is that the transition that Charlie Kirk was undergoing must have been really intense, right? Because he was expressing to his friends that he thought Israel would kill him if he turned. And still, he kept pushing forward. He stuck to his free speech principles, trying to stay true to his base, to the concerns of his base. It could have been super easy for him to fall in line and stop pressing, but he decided that he had reached his turning point and dug his heels in as best as he could to represent the concerns of his base, as was evident in his last interview with Ben Shapiro.
Charlie, we've pushed back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns, on Ukraine, on the border, so like maybe we should also ask a question. Is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says, because I know I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of years. So Ben, some people would accuse Israel of wanting to ethnically cleanse. Some people in the Israeli government are saying, again, it's all over the place, right? You have opinions all over. In your opinion, what would a good outcome 5 years from now be, and how does one respond to the claims of ethnic cleansing?
So clearly, I think that Charlie Kirk was trying to be bold about challenging the Israel talking points, but I think he was also trying to give people like Ben Shapiro, like really credible pro-Israel voices, a chance to convince the American youth why they shouldn't listen to these voices who are saying that Israel is committing a genocide, that Israel is starving an innocent civilian population. And if you find the full clip of this anywhere online, you will see that Ben Shapiro does not provide a good counter, because Zionists cannot really convince anybody that that Israel is not committing a genocide and starving a population of innocent people. They cannot. All they can do is censor, and censor maybe permanently, I don't know. However, suffice it to say, we would all be extremely lucky to have a friend like Candace, who is going to take your fears of being killed seriously and fight like hell to find the truth if something awful were to happen to you. So that people don't just get to murder you and change your entire identity, rewrite your entire history, and make everything you lived for in life meaningless. We would all want someone to fight for us and our memory that way. America saw the Laura Loomers and the Mark Levins hounding him on X with tweets in the months leading up to his death, treating him like the enemy, essentially. He told Megyn Kelly that he was being harassed not only in public, but he was also being harassed in private, in text messages, and was afraid about the future of the West. He was very specific about that.
I'm afraid because, again, I want civilization to win. I want the West to win.
And his concerns that the Epstein blackmail ring and the Jewish-funded open border policies, etc., were destroying the West. And everyone in his circle was admitting to his fears in their own way. Here is Sean McGuire responding to Candace. He says, I was in a 10-person chat with Bill Ackman and Charlie on this topic. So everyone's revealing that they were doing chats and Zoom meetings trying to coach Charlie in this Hasbra type thing so he can be better at it. And he said, we did a few Zooms over the last quarter talking about Israel, anti-Semitism, and how the West wins. So they were trying to convince him that being a better defender of Israel and not platforming anti-Semitic voices, I guess, is how you protect the West and is how the West wins. So that is something that we can all sort of agree on too, is that he was convinced that he was fighting for the West. He wanted the West to win above all else, even above Israel. He wanted the West to win so badly that at the end of his life, he started to think, wait a minute, these Jewish donors are funding organizations and policies that are destructive to the West, and I need to call this out. I can't stay silent on this just to protect Israel. I just cannot. And he refused to stay silent on it, even though they were pulling funding from him. But no one can deny that he really and truly believed, since he was 18 years old, which he probably was being groomed since before he was 18, that he thought that this was the way the West wins, and that defending and protecting Israel would help the West win. And somehow, his blind devotion for so long did not matter, because even after his death, Israel posted an awful article about Charlie that illustrated how much a little bit of questioning can turn Jews and Zionists against you. It doesn't matter how loyal you are. Here's the headline in the Times of Israel 3 days after his death: "The wrong kind of friend, rethinking Charlie Kirk's support for Israel." Rethinking it? What? Anyway, in the weeks following October 7th massacre, Israel initially drew widespread sympathy from across the world. Yet, the sentiment quickly faded. As criticism mounted, many Israelis were outraged at what they saw as hypocrisy. How can we, a democracy that values human rights and free elections, be cast as the villains, while our enemies, people who execute LGBTQ individuals, are embraced as victims? He's talking about the Palestinians here. Our way is your way too. Still, Western public were not convinced. Support dwindled steadily, and among the few who remained vocal, some were hardly allies we should celebrate. One of them was Charlie Kirk. What? Yet, few realized that on American campuses, in debates and in rallies, Kirk championed views that stood in stark contradiction to the very values we claim to uphold, we meaning Zionists. Consider just a few examples. He claimed that Western culture was inherently superior to all others and urged audiences to stop listening to rap, a genre tied to African American communities, insisting people should return to music that built Western civilization. He once said that if he were to find out that the pilot of the plane he was set to board was a black man, he would inherently question his competence. He openly dismissed the very concept of empathy. These are all true. He even suggested reviving public executions, joking that he could be sponsored by Coca-Cola. He argued that women were depressed because they pursued careers instead of submitting to their husbands and raising children. Both him and Candace subscribed to this ideology, this thinking. He told a gay teenager that he did not agree with his lifestyle, even as the boy declared support for Republicans. The list goes on, but the point is clear. Charlie Kirk was an extremist, racist, misogynist, fascist. Undeniably, Kirk was an evil man who dedicated his life spreading hate. It is doubtful that his devotion to Israel stemmed from genuine solidarity with Jewish history and Zionist ideology, which sought to find a safe haven for the Jewish people. More likely, it was rooted in his evangelical belief that the return of Jews to the land of Israel is a step toward a messianic end times prophecy. I'm sorry, what now? So basically, even after a brutal public execution, they disapprove of Charlie's recent criticism of Israel so much that they used the teachings of dispensational Christianity and his Zionist programming to be hateful and racist and all those things to smear him. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call him totally a racist, but he did use very, very divisive language, which was his Zionist programming. All the concepts that he spewed on college campuses, some were to perpetuate the divide between races, the divide between political groups, and occasionally he would also preach really touching, really empathetic concepts that I absolutely agree with. So he did sort of flip-flop between sort of pushing very divisive language and then on sometimes pushing very unifying language, very humanitarian language. But Zionism is not very humanitarian, so he still had to sort of toe the line. But that's how dissatisfied they were with the transition that Charlie was undergoing. Even in death, they smeared him and his dispensational Christianity views as being anti-Semitic. What? Needless to say, I think most people can see right through the performance, especially the vigor with which they are using Kirk to recruit more young Zionists to essentially create an army against the anti-Israel left, while at the same time distracting the anti-Israel right that started noticing too much. And they were noticing too much with Charlie's help, by the way. And if they couldn't be nice after his death, here's what they wrote before his death. So a Rabbi David Yosef, posted this letter online, and it was a condolence letter. It was posted on September 16th on X, and Benjamin Netanyahu is tagged in it. And the letter is a condolence letter on behalf of Charlie Kirk. And the date on the letter is September 2nd, 2025. What? This is weird. Like, all the big X names, all the big influencers started calling this out. Like, why is this letter dated September 2nd? And then all the Zionists started rebutting this and saying, well, no, it was a typo. It was meant to be September 12th. And then offered up this article, which I will have a link to on my X account, a link to this article from Yeshiva World News, where the chief rabbi Yosef, in letter to Charlie Kirk's family, many among the Jewish would grieve with you, etc. And they said that the original letter is dated September 12th, 2025. Now, what's interesting about both letters, the original letter that was posted with a typo of September 2nd and this new letter where they're saying here is what's really supposed to be posted, both of the Jewish dates on both of these letters are wrong. So on the first letter, the Jewish date is 9 Elul, I don't know how to pronounce that, 5785. That translates to September 2nd, 2025. So the date on the original letter that's supposed to be the typo letter, the Jewish date and the English date matches completely. The second letter, which is supposed to be the correction, the September 12th date, the English date, and the Jewish date, which is 19 Elul 5787, doesn't match because the Jewish date is dated in the future to 2027. So you see what I'm saying? The letter that they offered up as a correction is an even worse typo than the original letter. Something's off here, isn't it? Really, really off. And no one seems to be looking into that. So we must, I repeat, we must reject this flimsy radical leftist trans shooter theory that they're clinging on to in order to break up the coalition that is forming between the people from all sides against the rogue, terrorist, illegitimate Epstein Island state of Israel. And now Nick is using his talents to add weight to the Zionist narrative that a radical leftist shot Charlie when we all know that's not what happened. We don't know exactly what happened, but we know without a shadow of a doubt that what they're telling us didn't happen. And for some reason, it feels like he desperately wants or maybe needs the radical leftist narrative to be true. And he kind of says so himself.
And the reason that I am digging in on this, I cannot fucking wait for it to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was some left-wing douchebag, because the low IQ anti-Semitism is dragging us to hell.
Wait, let me get this straight, okay? He hates the left so much that he wants it to be, without a shadow of a doubt, the radical leftists, because the rest of us are so low IQ anti-Semitic because we're questioning the Zionist-occupied government's narrative about who killed Charlie? Really? That's a weird position for someone like Nick Fuentes to take, don't you think?
It really is. We have reached a critical mass, and let's be honest, since October 7th, it has been a grift for many to glom on and post the most base, and I'm not saying based, I'm saying base, as in low, simple, primitive. It has been a fucking grift for various freaks and losers. They know that if they just shovel out the most low IQ, anti-Jew content, that's the easiest way to blow up on Twitter right now, just obviously. And as a consequence, now there isn't even a semblance of a movement. It's just an assortment of like Muslims that are anti-white, many of them, and many of them aren't American. A number of weirdo leftists, other assorted people.
Just to be clear, Jewish Zionism funds anti-whiteness. Anti-whiteness is not Muslim. Anti-white ideology is not black. It's Jewish Zionists that fund anti-whiteness. Okay? Okay.
And Jewish donors, they have a lot of explaining to do, a lot of decoupling to do, because Jewish donors have been the number one funding mechanism of radical, open border, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies, cultural institutions, and nonprofits. This is a beast created by secular Jews. And now it's coming for Jews, and they're like, what on earth happened? And it's not just the colleges, the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. It's like time for you guys to wake up and say no more, draw a line in the sand.
All they know is how to press one button. And so everything that happens. Now, granted, because of the nature of the problem, that's a pretty reliable button to press. If you're pressing the Jew button every time, you're going to have like a 95% hit ratio, 99% hit rate. And on some level, you might be right. But some things, it doesn't really work. We have a real low versus elite human capital problem. And this might be the biggest demonstration of that. The idea that Israel's number one cheerleader on the right wing was somehow killed by Israel. Sorry, not buying it.
Not buying it, guys. He's just not buying it. He's so convinced. Again, he's using his talents to make a very compelling case that we are all low IQ anti-Semites for even considering that the Zionist narrative we're being fed is false. Are we supposed to believe that Nick didn't do his homework on this one and he actually believes what he's saying right there? Are we supposed to believe that? You don't have to blame Israel for Charlie's death, but you don't have to discredit genuine interest in the lies of our occupied government either. That is called gaslighting, okay? And we're done with that. And he's making it very clear that he will always be more ideologically aligned with Zionism, aka supremacy, imperialism, globalism, than he'll ever be with common sense inclusivity.
If a white person gets killed and all of our Muslim allies that hate Israel, they're joining up with these like BLM and Antifa types celebrating the death of a white man because he supported colonialism and imperialism. It's like, wait a second, I don't really think you're on my side, actually. And the same goes for some of these left-wing types. We need to be very clear about what this political coalition is. It's not just anti-Israel, it's also pro-white. I saw some asshole say, well, Nick Fuentes is just a Zionist for white people. He's Netanyahu for white people. To the extent that Netanyahu is an ethno-nationalist fascist, yeah, we want America to be white. Problem? And you got left-wingers saying, well, that makes you just as bad as Israel. No, it actually doesn't. Being against the invasion of our country by immigrants, being in favor of preserving white America? No, that doesn't make... Netanyahu, first of all, is a war criminal. Second of all, he's influencing America. A foreign country is controlling our home country. Our home country controlling our home country is not the same, obviously. Maybe this is actually a good opportunity to say, we are not the same as these left-wing communists. We are not the same as these Muslim third worldists. We may all have problems with Israel, but we don't all have the same problem with Israel. You go to these protests and don't kid yourself. They're out there in their keffiyeh or whatever. They're out there in their bandanas, not because they give a fuck about our country, but because, you know, Muslims are dying. And if it wasn't for that, it would be back to your regularly scheduled programming. They'd be out there with the raised fist right next to BLM. They'd be talking about Trump's Muslim ban. You know what? I think Muslims should be banned from America. And not because I'm a Zionist, because whether Israel existed or doesn't exist, I actually don't want to live near a mosque because I'm a Christian. I think Muslims are invading Europe. Tommy Robinson didn't tell me to say that. That's just true. So let's be clear about what we are. We are nationalists. That is what we are. I am a far-right nationalist. I am not a communist. I am not left-wing. I am not Muslim, and I am not in favor of the open society. Yes, you can be all things at once. It is a multi-front war. I do not want to... I think Israel is our adversary. I think we should give Iran the bomb to check Israel, to balance Israel. I think we should take billions of dollars from these pro-Israel billionaires. They're foreign agents. I think we should register AIPAC. I think we should disallow non-Christians from having power in our society. But I also think we should close the borders. I also think we should have mass deportations. I also think we should shut down Muslims running our society. I don't want Zohran Mamdani being a mayor. That guy's an anti-white communist. Same thing with Ilhan Omar. I don't care how base she is on Israel. She hates whites.
So pretty much what he's saying here is, let's go after the symptom, not the cause, right? Because he's saying, I hate open border policies, I hate all of this stuff, we all have a problem with Israel, even though Israel is the one that's not Israel, but like Zionists. the one that he aligns with more ideologically, is the group funding open border policies, right? Now, I'm going to be really clear what my position is. I believe that every one of us, Muslims, Christians, blacks, Jews, Indians, everybody, can be pro-American. Okay, a lot of us are born here. We are privileged with a lot of American values, at least up until recently. In terms of free speech, even though free speech has been eroding for a very long time, Nick Fuentes believes that what it means to be American is white Christian. I don't believe that. I'm not subscribing to that at all. I think that our country has so much potential to be better than any other country. How do we not had a group of people at the top poisoning us to death for decades and pitting us against each other? So we're not focusing on thriving, we're focusing on destabilizing our country, which is what has been happening for decades, systematically. And the only people that have historically proven that they are anti-American are Zionists. And if you sell out to a Zionist, you are effectively abandoning America first. So I don't know what Nick Fuentes is doing, but he's sort of teeter-tottering on insanity, it seems. And I say that because even if you are a white nationalist, it makes absolutely no sense to sort of go soft on the people in power that are funding anti-whiteness, promoting anti-whiteness in every conceivable way, and going harder on the people who are not in power just because you hate them. That just doesn't make any sense. It's just not practical, actually. Not even in a self-preservation way. So I have no problem with people being white nationalists. You can be whatever you want, but make it make sense. And what Nick Fuentes is doing right now, he's saying, yes, Israel is the enemy. Sure, let's put some checks on Israel. But if you divide the coalition like this, you are not going to be effective against Zionism. So anyway, I do not agree with Nick's position on this topic and his new pivot, but we'll have to see where he goes with his newfound rise to the mainstream. And there is an independent journalist on X, Truth Teller. I don't know if anybody knows about him, but he seems to be very credible and very respected in the conservative space. And he was in a space asking whether or not something might have changed recently with Nick Fuentes, and this is what was being communicated in the space.
Do you stand by that same assertion that Nick Fuentes has now got a handler and he's possibly taken some money from some Jewish paymasters, and that's why he's changed his tune lately?
Yes, stand by it. The handler's real. S8200 name. David K. met Nick at CPAC, side event last December, then weekly calls since April. Grayzone has the log, enough is enough phrase, scripted. His sudden "we can't blame Israel" rant on Kirk's death, word for word from Walicki's playbook, same rabbi. Money, $2.3 million wired through Turning Point Action's Shell Consulting, but timestamp matches his pivot. Before, Zionists run GOP. After, conspiratards blame everything on Jews. Classic flip. He lost half his base on Cozy TV, views tanked, but gained protection. Feds dropped the 5-year probe, no more subpoenas. And yeah, he's quiet on Gaza now. Cheers deporting leftists instead. Paymasters? Ellison's kid, maybe. Nick dined with a tech investor in LA last month. No name, but flight logs match a Tel Aviv return. Controlled opposition. Straight up. He's not rebelling. He's recalibrating. For cash or for survival.
Right, so he said it was like $2.3 million, and he mentioned some guy named David K. Is that what he said?
Yeah, David K. That's the handler. Not 8200, but close. Ex-Mossad psychological ops, now media consultant. Leaked call from July. K to Fuentes. Nick, tone it down. Israel's not the enemy. The left is. We'll handle the rest. Then the $2.3 million shows up in a Cayman account tied to Turning Point Action, dated the next day. Grayzone sourced the audio from a whistleblower inside TPUSA. K also coached Walicki on the Rabbi Tour. Same network. Fuentes went from Groyper wars against Kirk to defending him, calling the shooter Antifa op. That's K's line. If you look at Nick's X, every Zionist control post vanishes after 24 hours. Algorithm tweak or handoff. Either way, $2.3 million buys a new script and a new silence.
Has he only been paid $2.3 million, or were there any other payments from any other Israeli Jewish billionaires like Bill Ackman or the Adelsons or Robert Shulman?
No, $2.3 million was the starter, but the real bag's bigger. Adelson family slipped him $7.8 million over 2 years, routed through youth leadership grants. No strings listed, but emails show for Israel content. Shulman gave TPUSA $12 million, but 1.2 of that funneled to Fuentes' America First PAC last month. After the flip, Rackman, he's the quiet one. $3.4 million in crypto, wallet traced to a Tel Aviv mixer, dated August 19th, all for media training. Fuentes' Cozy TV servers, upgraded same day, Shulman paid. Total haul, at least $18 million since the handler met him. Not bribes, donations. But when you pivot from Jews control everything to maybe they're okay, that's pay-per-view, and the bills do.
If I am not allowed to express myself politically without a lynch mob showing up to my front door to kill me, then we don't have civil rights. We must identify them. We must have them fired from their jobs. They must be censored on social media. There must be a cost.
Right? Charlie Kirk is a retard and honestly deserves the death penalty for being a coward.
Yeah, I don't know if any of this is true, but I think people who are not easily blinded by loyalty can see that something is very off. So, it's like Ian Carroll says.
Midterms are just a year away, and you're supposed to hate your neighbor way more by then. So they're going to need you to stop talking about uniting in our hatred of Israel and get back to the race war that they had scheduled. Thank you very much.
And Candace highlights this in her episode yesterday really well when she was talking about Thomas Crooks, that assassin that apparently disappeared and has no trace of anything we're not supposed to know anything about. We're just supposed to believe the narrative blindly. And she reminds us that we all have to keep hating each other, and they will do anything to ensure that it stays that way.
They said, look, actually, I had been able to scrape everything about Thomas Crooks before the feds got rid of everything. Now, usually we go, was he on the left? Was he on the right? Because that's the bait. The bait is to make me as a conservative hate you if you were on the left. And if you were on the left, the goal is to make you hate Candace because it allows them to operate in broad daylight. The reality of Thomas Crooks is going to be a story that we should get familiar with. He was both on the left and on the right. He actually traded sides. He started actually as a Trump supporter. He was at first very angry against the left, outwardly calling for the murder of people that are on the left. And there were videos that he was posting of himself shooting with no bullets in the gun in his bedroom. I'm going to show you one of those videos that's since been scraped. This was a comment on a video Trump humiliated on national TV. And he wrote to someone, haha, that's funny because I always believed being patriotic was lining up a bunch of socialist Jews like the ones that booed Trump and blasting their useless brains out with an AR. He wrote, I've noticed a lot of liars talking about the truth in this post. Well, let me tell you some truth. Every one of the Trump-hating Democrats deserves to have their heads chopped off and put on stakes for the world to see what happens when you F with America. So you go, okay, this guy was a Trump supporter. Then he does a radical transformation around 2020, and this had something to do with COVID. He got very angry at Trump, and he was outwardly saying things where people were reporting them on YouTube being like, this guy is absolutely insane. He is a maniac.
And now that, we're getting journalists who are investigating this Tyler Robinson guy, we're starting to realize that he has no real political footprint. We just have to take the narrative that the government is pushing, that he's a radical leftist, because apparently he has a trans boyfriend who has mysteriously disappeared, by the way. He's just gone. They allowed him to disappear. The story just gets weirder and weirder. And in fact, I want to know how many Zionists were paid to act like leftists celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, because I don't trust anything that I'm seeing right now. Everything seems to be manufactured to ensure that we hate each other. Because the most dangerous thing for these people is you and I finding common ground and realizing something's up with them. And they're doing their very best to get in between you and I having a conversation and actually finding that we have things in common. They're pulling out all the stops. They're pulling out all the tech to make sure that you and I don't sit down and have a conversation with each other. They will literally start a war in a different country. They will fucking fly planes into towers if they have to. They will do whatever it takes for you and I not to sit down and realize that we actually have a lot in common and we have a common enemy to stir things up. Anything that feels really convenient just doesn't feel genuine to me. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just getting way too distrusting. But if there is a narrative that's being pushed that is forcing me or convincing me to hate one group of people and ignore that my politicians are selling out to a foreign country and selling my rights and freedoms to a foreign country, then I'm not trusting that narrative at all. I'm going to focus on you who are taking away my freedoms, and then we can get back to the people taking Tylenol, and we can get back to the people celebrating Kirk's death, and we can get back to the radical leftist Democrats. We can get back to them. But anyway, If you are absolutely in love with Nick Fuentes and you cannot help yourself but to hang on to every single word that he says, here is messaging from him that you ought to take to the bank, since he seems to be all over the place right now and can't decide which angle he wants to win you over with.
Do you think that we should be exploring ways of seeking truces, alliances, or at least less combative discourse with our opponents?
Absolutely. And it's so funny. I feel like we're very aligned on this. Maybe we have a similar reaction to it because, it's not lost on people that there are real cleavages in society. There is real tension between the races, the religions, the genders, the partisan sides. And so the powers that be did not create those tensions, but they do exacerbate them all the time. And they exacerbate those tensions for, that's where the word conspiracy comes from, for a sort of unseen, concealed agenda, which is convoluted and sophisticated. It's not easily accessible. And I got the sneaking suspicion that is what this provided, which was an opportunity to drive the right against the left, especially when there does seem to be maybe some consensus forming. I know a lot of my clips were becoming popular among liberals and left-wing people because of my criticisms of the Trump administration, of the conduct in Israel. And to the extent that there's a horseshoe, or a far right, far left, maybe realizing they have something in common, this gets in the middle of that process and says, no, we're going to see now a rerun of the right versus the left. And now the right has got to puff up their chest and get angry at the far left. And so on my show on Thursday, I said, we actually need to not take the bait and not lean into our first instinct, which is to get angry at all leftists or all liberals or demonize the other side. And we should really isolate it out and say, obviously, people that want political violence, that's unacceptable. People that encourage or incite terrorism, that can't be allowed in a free society. That's antithetical to a free society. And we should take the opportunity actually to show magnanimity and benevolence to the other side. People are saying that this is right-wing cancel culture. They're saying, how are we any better than the left? They're saying, isn't that hypocritical? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And I don't even think we need to argue about it at all, actually. The time for arguments is over. It's been over. You want to see the last guy that was arguing with the left? Well, you can attend his funeral on Sunday. He got shot for arguing. So I'm good. We tried debating. We tried arguing. We tried running for office. We tried governing. And what happened? Well, let's see. Trump got shot in the head, and then Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck and died. And now our own side wants to argue about the principle of the matter. And we should take the opportunity actually to show magnanimity and benevolence to the other side and really kind of stand against any forces that would try to use this to manipulate us, because they really count on people, because it is so sensational, to get whipped up in the moment and then become irrational. All this talk about fairness, principles, objectivity does not apply here. It does not apply because we are fighting against an enemy that wants us dead, that wants us bankrupted, ostracized. Look at what they have done to everybody that opposes the system. Lawfare, persecution, death threats, murder attempts. This is what they do. What did they do to the president, to Charlie Kirk, to me? I have people texting me, you shouldn't support censorship, then they'll take away our rights. My rights already got taken away. I can't process credit cards. I can't have a bank account. I was put on a federal no-fly list for a year. I'm still banned on Instagram and Facebook, and I never shot anybody, and I never celebrated shooting anybody. Now you want to talk about our rights? It's a little late. Maybe a week ago, people realized right and left might be an artificial divide that they kind of exacerbate when it's convenient. When you see someone get their neck exploded like that, it suspends reason, people forget, and they just want to see the other side pay. So I do think it's an opportunity to, and although it's difficult for the right, find some consensus, not necessarily with the people that want to shoot us in the head or disrespect a vigil or something like that, but with people that want to see America succeed. And they exist on the left also.
This is the point that I was trying to make. Apparently, Nick is making separate points with different people. Like he's saying something to his, underground base that watches his Rumble show, and then he's on Russell Brand mainstream platform, and he's saying something different, preaching a message of unity. I would suggest that you rely on his message of unity and ignore everything else that relates to division. because we all know who the real enemy is, including him. And if he's getting paid to distract you and to lead you down the wrong path, you're not getting paid. Okay, so just be mindful. Don't be a blind loyalist. As for Kirk's death, I just want to go over a little bit of Kirk's death. So we know 100% that a radical leftist 22-year-old did not kill Charlie. That's an indisputable fact, unless, of course, the FBI wants to release the full footage of the shooter on the roof and the timestamps of the obviously fake text messages, right? Unless they do that, we know for 100% that a radical leftist 22-year-old did not kill Charlie. We're not taking their bullshit anymore, and we're not suspending our capacity for logic and reason because they're lazy and sloppy and lying. We're just not going to do that anymore. We did that for JFK, we did that for 9/11, we did that for 10/7. We're not going to do it anymore. Fair? There is no reason why right-wing government would be falsifying evidence for a crime committed by left-wing radicals. No reason. Unless, of course, the funders are writing a Hollywood script and they wrote roles for the heroes and the villain who all work for the same production company. And the heroes are supposed to be the right wing and the villains are supposed to be the left wing, and they all work for the same production company. And to make matters worse, the people who attended Kirk's memorial last weekend aren't buying the lone gunman theory, not even for a second.
So I was in line with people for 3 hours talking to all the folks, and they were Christians and they were happy and they had families and they were lovely people. And I started talking to them and they were happy and prayerful, and none of them that I spoke to believed that the shooter that they got and have arrested actually did it. And they are
the War Room Posse. It's 0%.
They were they were angry.
Same with our chat.
They don't need that. They don't. Not saying this guy's not a bad guy and an evil guy.
Right.
But they think something. And this is why Kash Patel did announce today that the FBI has officially expanded the investigation. My big fear was you would get a lone wolf, lone gunman, and Utah police and everybody want to shut it down. I think Kash said today that they've expanded it out because we have to.
I don't even understand why we keep talking about Kash like he's a serious person. He's just not a serious person, and we should stop talking about him like he is. He is obviously a plant, and he's covering up for the deep state left and right, and he's doing it in a very sloppy way. I mean, oh my gosh. So anyway, there are lots of theories and questions swirling around, needless to say. And two theories are standing out to me right now, and I think I'm kind of leaning towards one of them heavily. So the camera weapon theory, I'm looking at this, device behind him, and I'm like, clearly this wound was an exit wound. I don't know which side it came out of. I'm really bad with left and right. I think it came out of his left side. So yeah, the wound was an exit wound. We know that for sure. And then, less than 5 minutes after, one of his staff members came, and his videographer, I think, came and took down the equipment. And I'm like, what? This was the worst handling of a crime scene you've ever seen in your entire life. Anyone making excuses for how poorly this crime scene was handled is part of the Hasbra committee. Okay? All right. I definitely believe that there was a shooter on site, but I do not think that a bullet from a shooter killed Charlie. Candace is now reporting that a primary source stated that they saw a man in tactical gear and he reported it to the law enforcement, but I still do not think that a shooter killed Charlie. I believe that the actual weapon was controlled by remote. That's what I think. Call me crazy, that's what I think. And I do believe that there were about 4 to 5 people around him sending signals to coordinate the strike. So here is a video that I'm going to play out. Those 2 people, that guy in the blue, I really do think that he has a remote control in his hand. I think that woman in the striped dress might be part of it. That woman in the striped dress there. I think they're all signaling. I think the woman in the striped dress is signaling to the guy in the blue, who then steps back. You're going to see him. And he does actually put something in his pocket. He does.
And then right after the shot, he puts something in his right pocket and walks away towards Charlie to assess the situation.
You see it? There he is. And then he runs to Charlie, nothing in his hand. So I do think that those people there, including there was a guy in the audience in the front of Charlie who was also doing something with his shoulder. I think he was part of signaling. I do not think that there was a weapon on his shoulder, but I do think he was part of the signaling team to make sure that the coordination between the remote and the gunfire sort of matched. That is my theory. And I believe that the weapon was high-tech and designed for covert assassination-like strikes like this one. And Stu Peters does a little bit of a breakdown of what could another theory, which is the mic shooting a projectile theory, which I think the projectile from the mic, if that is, and that's a theory that I'm leaning towards, shot something through his skin that came out through his carotid there. But take a look at this.
Here it is from the wide angle. Watch Charlie Kirk's right side of his t-shirt. Watch the lavalier lapel mic. Do you see it explode? Let's bring it in just a little bit closer. Watch this. Put it in a freeze frame. That is the explosion from Charlie Kirk's lavalier lapel mic. Want to see it again? Bring it in closer. Remember when we told you that that was absolutely an exit wound? Yeah, it is. Check the trajectory of the round that was deployed from that lavalier lapel mic. That went directly from Charlie Kirk's lapel. That went directly from underneath Charlie Kirk's white t-shirt up through his neck and created the exit wound that we told you was an exit wound immediately when we saw that exit wound. First we had exploding pagers. Now we have exploding mics. Do you remember the vector analysis from John Bray? That proves that all of the activity came from the mic that Charlie Kirk was wearing.
So the full version of that clip will also be on my X account. The mic in the shirt exploding explains why the shirt puffs up like this before the wound shows on his neck. So people are now saying like, oh, maybe this footage is edited and maybe this is AI. But no, that this shirt kind of moving this strange way was always one of the first questions that we asked from the within the hour that it happened. So I know that this footage is real. It's not edited in any way in terms of making the shirt move funny. And that thing that sort of flipped off behind his ear was actually his necklace, which kind of makes sense because it flips off from the side of the mic that he was wearing. So when that thing goes off, his necklace explodes and sort of flings out of his shirt. And I think his wife said it was like the St. Michael or something, which I think is Catholic. More weird stuff. Then I found another podcast who brought up something way sus, and it has to do with another podcaster, Destiny, who I believe is on the left, which, by the way, I think that these Destiny people are also paid by these groups that are funding them to be agitators and divisive on purpose. I don't think that what they're pushing and the message that they're pushing is genuine. I think that they are funded to be as disgustingly divisive as they are. But listen to this podcaster who brings this up.
Now, Destiny often streams for hours at a time, often streaming for upwards of 12 hours, and it just so happened that he was live streaming when the clip of Charlie Kirk getting shot started circulating online. Shortly after this, he starts talking about it to his audience, and someone called in to his live stream. Here's the clip.
Well, what's up? I'm streaming, by the way.
This is... Did you see what happened?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, dude, Charlie's gonna be fucking dead.
I'm pretty sure he's already dead. Yeah.
Dude, we're fucked. We are so fucked.
By we, you mean we as a country right now, the United States and the current.
The party, but mostly
also, yes, wait.
Probably
I think that we're super fucked. I agree. Hold on, wait. I'll text you on Discord. I just don't want to say anything crazy. It's gonna ruin our shit.
It turns out the person Destiny was talking to is someone named Z. Cohen Sanchez. Now, who is Z? In November of 2024, so just under a year ago, Z founded an organization called National Ground Game, or NGG for short. And this organization has received tons of money from Act Blue. So, Z founded NGG, and she also founded the Unfuck America Tour. And the Unfuck America Tour was being funded by NGG. The Unfuck America Tour was created essentially to harass Charlie Kirk at all of his Turning Point events, and for this reason, they were always banned from his events, but still they would sneak in. And on their website, they have a roster of their creators listed. So Z is there, Destiny is there, and this guy is there, Hunter Kozak.
Do you hate Charlie Kirk? I know I do. Charlie Kirk is currently poisoning the mind of every young American who can stand to look at his stupid face. and we're trying to do something about that.
You may have already recognized Hunter Kozak. Hunter Kozak presumably snuck into the Utah event, and he is the guy who was asking Charlie Kirk about trans violence and mass shootings right before Charlie was shot.
Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
His boss, Z. Cohen Sanchez, then called into Destiny's stream, freaking out and saying, "We're fucked."
Dude, we're fucked.
What did Z mean by that? And why did Destiny cut Z off before Z could say anything else?
Like, yeah, like that, the party, but like mostly
Also,
like,
yes,
like
wait.
probably
I think that we're super fucked. I agree. Hold on, wait. I'll text you on Discord.
Super sus. But that being said, whatever theory you land on, we know that a radical leftist 22-year-old did not kill Charlie. If the death was staged, fine. Maybe we're living through a psyop in that sense as well. Rather than arguing about whether his death was fake or not, we have to beat them at their own game, which is using their sloppy tricks against them. I mean, all of these people that are being recruited, they are seeing the same thing that we're seeing. We should be encouraging them to ask the same questions that Charlie was asking. And in addition to picking up Charlie's mantle and asking the same questions that Charlie started to ask at the end of his life, now ask, why is our government covering up Charlie's death and doing such a sloppy investigation? And wherever we are meeting these new recruits, when they come to the college campuses, to the high school campuses, this is what we should be encouraging them to talk about. The fact that the government is covering up Charlie Kirk's death. Why was Charlie Kirk talking about Jewish donors funding radical leftist movements and open border policies? And why was Charlie Kirk emphasizing the release of the Epstein files? And why are these new spokespeople for Charlie who are taking over are not emphasizing that? Why were his donors censoring him? Why are we as a country being censored? Why is TikTok being censored? So whatever they think they're going to get out of these new recruits, we should be trying to infiltrate that. And when I say we, I mean we free thinkers who are not triggered by all this partisan politics bullshit, and it's going to distract us from what the goal is, which is to free our country from foreign control. Because when the next pandemic comes, when the next silent genocide rolls in, and it's coming, we all would have taken part in this continuation and justification of cancel culture, and the canceling will continue worse than before because we didn't take a stand and say, no, we're not going to continue this practice of canceling each other. We're done with that. The left was wrong when they did it, and the right is wrong when they're doing it now. We're not going to just keep swinging the pendulum from one extreme to the end. We have to stop that. And we can form coalitions from within the left, within the right, within the center. We can all come together and first and foremost agree that our movement is anti-Israel. And some of the fundamental things that we should all agree on is free speech, closed borders, no more dual citizenship in Congress. Anyone serving in a foreign military must have their citizenship revoked. Nuremberg trials, making gender-affirming care for minors illegal. Release all the files, Epstein, 9/11, etc., all of them. Making the penalty for destroying official government documents a life sentence without possibility for parole, period. Remove liability shields from all industries, reduce government and give rights back to the states, and designate Israel an enemy state and register all of its lobbies under FARA. These are like the top things that we should all agree on moving forward, and everything else should be open for debate. And I think that the majority of Americans could get on board with that. I really do. And then we can get back to fighting about all of our domestic issues without foreign interference sabotaging our efforts to make our country thrive. So anyway, this episode is extremely long. I did not intend for it to be this long, but I could not help myself. So anyway, I'm going to head out now. And if I don't see you in my comments, leave me a thumbs up to let me know that you were here. And I cannot wait to see you in my next episode.